Welcome to the Momentum Lifestyle Podcast, where we interview an inspiring, educational, and entertaining guest to help you build confidence, find balance, and live a life of impact. We'd like to thank our sponsor today, Be Spunky. Now, Blake, Gino, and myself have been using their Reboot product for well over 6 months now, and it has been life-changing. I found myself recovering faster, having way more energy throughout the day, and honestly feeling just more jacked up as a man. And this is because Reboot is clinically formulated to support healthy male hormone levels, providing stress relief, improved strength and stamina, enhanced drive, and overall well-being. Be Spunky Reboot contains a proprietary blend of 10 natural and organic herbs and active ingredients that are renowned for helping men to enhance physical and cognitive performance, improve stamina, energy, and endurance, optimize testosterone levels, support healthy reproductive function, support cardiovascular function, relieve stress, mild anxiety, irritability, relieve tiredness, fatigue, support healthy sleep patterns, and support healthy body weight. So as you can see, it is a must-have product for all men. So head to their website, bespunky.com.au. That's bespunki.com.au, and use the code MOMENTUM to receive 10% off all Be Spunky products.
Hey, Tansley, welcome to the podcast.
Blake, thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Mate, it's been how long? 8 years? 5 years?
A while.
Yeah, it's been a while. Looking forward to talking about what's changed over the last 5 to 8 years. But before we get stuck into it, can you give the people a 60-second to 2-minute spiel about your life and what's got you to where you are now?
Would love that. Yeah, I'm a dad. I have 9-year-old twins. I'm here on the Gold Coast enjoying everything that the outdoor lifestyle here has to offer. In terms of career and passion, I'm a business coach. I specialize in personal trainers and coaches and nutrition experts, taking them online, helping them to have more impact. And that came on the back of me spending 13 years in the fitness industry. I was a terrible failure at high school academically, so I went down the path of becoming a personal trainer. I thought, I can do this and piggyback into physio, but I actually fell in love with the industry, with sales, with influence, with fitness as a conduit for people to transform their life, which took me into personal development, into a whole bunch of cool stuff. And now I get to help others where I was 3, 5, 10 years ago, sort of follow a similar thing if that's what they're after.
One of the things that I love and one of the things that we definitely connected over is a slightly unique approach to life. And we might as well just rip straight into the NoFap, which I'll get you to, which has nothing to do with, actually it does, but not directly related to coaching. But I'll get you to talk a little bit about that experiment and what you learned about yourself when you went through it.
Yeah, great. Love this topic. It gets a lot of interest, which I didn't think it would. However, I recently went 80 days. I called it a feminine cleanse. My mates called it a vag vacation, where basically I withdrew from females, not only dating and sexually, but obviously porn, from ejaculation, and also from receiving energy from the feminine. And I'll get to that in a minute. But why this happened, or why I decided to do this, was I noticed about 8 months ago, a lot of my worth was coming from women. I think going way back to when I was 18, 20, and through my 20s, my validation came from being good at sport and from getting love from attractive females, or who I found attractive. So I realized that that had sort of crept back in more recently. So I decided to go on what I thought would be a 30-day fast initially, and then I extended it. And it's funny, man, that the patterns I found myself in, here's a really good example. I think about a week in, I'd made my coffee at home and went for a surf and was just relaxing in the sun by the beach. And I found myself lining up for a coffee at this cafe next to where I was surfing. And I sort of woke up to what I was doing and said, dude, you've just had a coffee an hour ago. Why are you lining up? And I noticed like ahead of me was 3 or 4 attractive females. And I was like, man, have I just gone into this line to be around that energy and to order a coffee on the off chance that I'll start a conversation or do something? So there was all these reminders. I actually found the no FAP not that hard because I've been doing that for a while. But I noticed, where was I leaky and where was I getting all these little, almost like bumps of a cocaine hit, but all these little bumps of feminine energy from the cute barista at the cafe, from being around the vicinity of attractive women in a chance of a conversation. And once I detached from that, I was like, man, how much energy is going into this to get some validation? It was incredibly eye-opening. I think it's like when you fast, and I know you've done some longer food fasts, water fasts where you don't have any food, you realize, I put a lot of energy into thinking about consuming, preparing, and shopping for food. And it was similar. Once I fully withdrew from it, it was highlighted to me how much of my validation, I was 35 at the time, still came from that. And it's funny, man, my first reaction was to be very cold to women. And I think some regulars, some friends are having cafes where I work from, or people I bump into must have thought, man, I thought that guy was a nice guy. He's been an arsehole to me, because I fully withdrew. And then the pendulum swung. I was like, I can still be transactional and pleasant, but I don't have to go beyond that to get more attention, to have a bit of a flirtatious conversation or a cheeky banter. It was incredibly eye-opening.
Because I've known you about you doing this for a while, but the actual details of it, I didn't. But fuck me, I resonate way too much with that. I did a thing with my kinesiologist called a feminine collapse, and essentially it's cleaning up my mummy wounds. And you and I spent a lot of time on social media, and prior to the relationship I'm in now, of which you've spoken with Shani on the phone, I think, before, haven't you? Yeah. You know, like I owe all exes an apology, really, because similar thing, I was looking for a hit and often use social media, and deep down, like, you can get away with it on the surface level, but deep down, you know that you're fucking doing the wrong thing, and you're looking for a little hit, a little bit of attention, a little bit of approval here. And it's amazing. Like, when I did this feminine collapse, which could be of interest for you based off what you've just said, it fell away within 2 weeks. I just didn't like, and similar to you, it's much easier in hindsight, and I'm sure there's plenty of blokes like realizing, fuck, I do that as well, is like the amount of attention and headspace that females used to consume for me was, I don't know how the fuck I got anything else done. It used to consume so much. So I definitely resonate with that. Is that, in hindsight now, obviously 80 days, you know, going through that process, is that something that you see has always been there, or is that something off the back of your last long-term relationship? Can you see a period in which that started to become a thing?
Yeah, I think I can trace it back to year 12 in high school. I suddenly had a growth spurt and grew to my height now, and started getting female attention. And it was an incredible feeling. It's an incredible addictive drug. And I would call that like the creative energy that I could have been putting into better projects was poured into chasing these hits from women. And as an avoidant, it was funny. I would get the hits, and then I would crave the love and the affection so much. But then when I had it, it would terrify me and I'd push it away. And what I also found from this cleanse was, it was also no ejaculation, but this wasn't the style where I self-pleasured almost daily without porn. And that in itself, I'd done this before, but that in itself, the first time I did it was incredibly hard, because I think porn it's pixels on a screen externally, whereas doing that without it was very different. And I noticed in this cleanse as well, my reaction to feeling full and overwhelmed and stressed was through ejaculation. And it was interesting to look what's underneath this feeling of like, I want to jerk off right now. what's underneath that? Well, it's a feeling of something I'm not dealing with, or something I've got a head in the sand approach with, or just not having any release throughout the day. That was my temporary, vow to let off the pressure. And I know you've been experimenting with this as well. I've seen your stories and posts. It's going to sound weird, but I feel like I was vibrating at a higher level when I wasn't giving into temptation of ejaculation. I was self-pleasuring just through, sometimes it was just slow touch to begin with, and music and a self-massage. But I was able to hold a higher frequency, drop any neediness. And what's funny is I felt more attention from females in that 80 days because of that. It was the irony of it all.
100%, totally get it. What is that? You and I back in the day used to talk weird shit anyway, so this is just a continuation of that. But what does that self-pleasure practice look like? Because I'm sure a number of blokes are like, how the fuck do you do self-pleasure without porn? Like, did you have to start getting a bit creative with your imagination? Like, I assume a whole bunch of not only retraining yourself from a self-pleasure point of view, but retraining yourself from not a performance blow point of view. So whether you take yourself to the edge and then bring yourself back off, whatever, like, what did that process look like as you started to kind of retrain yourself?
Dude, great question. For me, it was becoming much more sensitive. Sensitive to the subtle touch, sensitive to parts of my body that might be more feel good for me or not feel good for me. And even sensitivity, like in the tantra world, I've heard people talk about like a 1 to 10 scale, right, of pleasure. And for a lot of men during intercourse or self-pleasure or porn, once you're at a 7 or an 8, it's called the point of no return. Like one more stroke or one more whisper in your ear or one more thrust and you're beyond, right?
Yeah.
So this practice was I'd never felt a 1 or a 2 pleasure before. It was always 0 to 10. So it was becoming much more sensitive, and not sensitive in a way that's like every word's going to hurt me, but sensitive like a ninja would be sensitive during a raid, or like sensitive to little nuances in my body of feeling and pleasure. Now I can say I'm a 3, I'm a 5, I'm a 2, but it took a lot of retraining, because I don't know about you, but my introduction to porn and ejaculation was back in the dial-up internet days. Oh, mum's going to the shops to get milk. I've got 8 minutes. Let me do this in shame and in a closed door, and it sort of felt guilt around it. So it was retraining, 15, 20 years of that.
100%. And what became your, I was going to use the word coping mechanism, but it's not so much a coping mechanism anymore because it becomes integrated. What becomes your outlet for stress, frustration, maybe even anger, like all those feelings that you once used as a, like that were released with blowing? What then became your coping mechanism, your outlet, your tool, your choice to move through those things that would have been used, through blowing in the past?
A couple of things. The first was to just feel what I'm feeling. It doesn't sometimes need to be rushed out of. And this label of like, oh, this is a negative emotion or this is a positive emotion. Well, they're all just emotions and we think they're negative. And that's kind of like a high level answer, but it's just like to sit with the emotion. Maybe it will pass. And can I feel sadness or loneliness for 10 minutes or for 60 minutes? Outside of that, I allowed joy into my life, and I even planned daily joy activities. When I was in business mode from 25 to 35, I only read books that would give me, in my eyes, an ROI, return on investment. What am I going to learn for this that I can implement? I didn't read a fiction book for decades. So joy to me could look like reading a book, not to learn anything, but just because I enjoy the story. It looked like looking after plants. And now I think that's quite a feminine energy to receive from something living that you're looking after, that you're giving. Raking leaves, skateboarding. I got back into skateboarding since I was 18. I hadn't had a board. I bought a skateboard. I would doodle in my journal just with colors and spirals and geometry that I'd seen elsewhere, and just, I just gave myself and planned every day to have an hour or a time in the afternoon to do that. And when I did that, you could call that filling up your feminine, or tapping into more feminine energy. When I did that, I didn't then have the need to release through porn. And it was incredibly liberating.
For you, was there resistance initially? And for many, there's this like, and it's actually something I'm going through at the moment, so I just thought I'd speak to it. It's like this time piece of like, I don't have time to skateboard. I don't have time to water plants. I don't have time. Was there any scarcity piece or story piece that you had to move through? Or did you find that transition pretty smooth in terms of opening up time for surfing, skateboarding, raking leaves, etc.?
Short answer is, yeah, I did find that really hard.
Yeah.
For sure. Like, what am I going to get from this? I have too much to do. But I think this force versus flow idea, like for me, I think I reminded myself that in the past, when I allowed flow to happen, I would come back and be sharper. It was sharpening the axe for me. I did think that. I've also thought through this healing the last few years, and the work that I've done is, I've chased business success for external validation. Well, what if I cure this? Will I still be as driven to be in my business? Will I still be as driven to chase things if I realize I'm chasing them for somebody else's approval? And then I sort of realized, it's like what they say, like if comedians weren't depressed, they wouldn't be funny, right? Like they get inspiration from the darkness. But for me, it was more, well, if I do lose the drive to grow something or do something, then it wasn't really something worth pursuing anyway. What about you? Are you finding it hard? Are you believing that time story?
Yeah, totally. And it's what I find interesting. What you just said then is a similar story that I've had to move through around the underlying motivation, and a lot of it has come from fuck you energy, which is the darkness of like, I'll prove you motherfuckers wrong, and like that whole energy, which I actually listened to Tom Bilyeu talk about it, and he reckons he used to be like 80% darkness, 20% light, of like doing it from a really clean energy. And now he's like 80% light, 20% darkness. And he says, for me, there's still times where I tap into like, I know you motherfuckers are waiting for me to fail. And he still uses it every now and then, but it's a much cleaner motivation. And I had the exact same, I think you said it just then, the exact same concern of like, what happens when I move through these wounds, these triggers, this darkness? Am I still motivated to do what I wanted to? Like, held on to that so tightly, because some people use it really well. Like, you look at Michael Jordan, you look at David Goggins, they're dark motherfuckers, but they use darkness as well as anyone. So what was that process for you? And has any motivation slipped, or has anything shifted when you've moved from the kind of dark fuck you type of energy to a kind of cleaner motivation?
Yeah, I love that analogy of the dark and the light, or the clean and the dirty. I think that dirty style, it's like dirty fuel, it might burn bright, but it burns fast. Whereas the clean energy is something that lasts for a longer, almost permanent time. For me, what shifted was, I mean, don't get me wrong, that style of energy works.
Fucking oath.
In 2019, I had a breakthrough year in my business. But I was a boring robot, and I cut off most people from my life. And it worked for business purposes, but I was chasing financial rewards just because. And I was chasing that to post in the masterminds that I was in to gain their approval. Now it's shifted. And my experience in the floods that we had in our hometowns helped a lot with this. Now it's shifted to, well, who can I serve more? But what's my impact going to be as a result of getting more success? And now I wake up with clean energy and not like this pressure that I feel I'm running out of time. And I feel like now I'm shifted to, well, cool, how many case studies can we collect this year? What's the ripple effect of me bringing on new students into my world? And that, to me, it's shifted from chip on my shoulder, prove them wrong, to let me like elevate others and help others. And it's way more clean, and it's a more attractive energy, I believe.
100%. Couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned very briefly in there a few years ago, you went through a big transition. And it sounds like you did a lot of work. Was there a specific thing that became a catalyst for the work? Was there a coach, a therapist, a style of, or a modality that became a catalyst for you based on, you said something around a couple of years ago. It was pretty big for you from a transition point of view.
Yeah. There was a couple of things. I entered a brief relationship, and I remember the girl looked at my library. The woman looked at my library and said, "Oh, you've got lots of business books, but like not many about like yourself or relationships." They kind of scoffed at the idea, and I was like, I don't need relationship books. But that started a process. I can't remember what came first, but I had therapy for 18 months. And along that way as well, a bunch of plant medicines. And the theme in all of those modalities and tools was it's safe to let women in. And just prior to that time, I'd entered sort of a dark, I found sort of a dark corner of men's work and this section on the internet, which was really like, guys don't need women, take sex away from the relationship. Women don't have anything to bring to the table. That was their belief. And I'd started to buy into some of these ideologies.
What's the name of this group?
There's a lot. There's like the Black Pill movement, the MGTOW movement.
Dude, I literally listened to a fucking podcast.
Rogan had it.
Chris Williamson and Rogan were talking about it last week.
Correct. When they spoke about it, I was like, oh yeah, that was me sucked into that world and that belief system. And a friend of mine who's a men's coach said, "Pete, do you have any friends that are not, do you have any women friends?" And like, I was like, no, dude, like, what am I going to learn from them? That was my response, as if like every relationship I have to learn something from. And that was around the time that relationship ended. I started therapy. A psilocybin journey like showed me some of these things where it's safe to let women in. And the last 2 years have gone deep into that for me.
What was if you're okay with sharing, which you don't have to if you don't, what was the block for you around women and letting them in on a deeper level?
When I was 13, my parents separated and dad moved to Brisbane. I was on the Gold Coast. He moved an hour away, and there was a period where he was absent from our life. And in my 13-year-old brain at the time, I thought, well, it's time for me to step up and leave this household and be the man and push most things down. But I also, along the way, as I did the work recently, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm pretty sure mum had an affair. And so the 13-year-old boy, the 13-year-old version of me witnessed that and could see that women are not to be trusted. Do not let them in, because that's what eventually will happen to you. And I didn't realize that until I did some hypnotherapy with a therapist 2 years ago, that my avoidant tendencies were, if you let the feminine in, you will eventually be burned by them. So it's much easier to keep them at arm's distance. And yet I craved it so much.
Yeah, it's a weird push-pull, isn't it?
Incredibly ironic, yeah.
You mentioned plant medicine, which we're both big fans of.
Yeah.
What role has that played in your healing growth journey? And what different approaches have you taken when it comes to plant medicine so far?
I sort of dove into the deep end, and my first experience, other than party drugs in my 20s, was DMT, and in that there was this feminine, almost this jester style energy, sort of teasing me, but also saying, "Pete, like, you can let us in, we've got you." And that exact same theme I experienced in mushroom journeys, and then during ayahuasca, same voice and the exact same theme and feel and colors of, "Pete, you can let me," meaning the feminine, us, you can let us in.
Fascinating.
And they say the plants give you what you need, and they definitely did. And that was a recurring theme in sort of my first 12 months diving into that rabbit hole of, it is safe and we've got you, and just let go, just surrender. And the first time I did mushroom journey do that, I think I bawled for an hour straight. Just finally like releasing this wall built around my heart just to like let them, the feminine, in, but it was also letting dudes in. Like I had a lot of close mates growing up, but I never really told them shit. I didn't even tell my best friends, like my parents split up. I never truly let anyone in. So although it was the plant medicine journey showed me to let the feminine in, it was really to let people in and to drop those walls that I'd built to protect me.
As a observer watching your socials, there feels a sense of community and unity amongst like your energy from obviously knowing you 5 or 7 years ago, however long. Is that something that feels true to you in terms of the last couple of years playing out in your world?
Without a doubt. And yeah, I appreciate you seeing that. But yeah, without a doubt, I moved back to the Gold Coast about 2 years ago, and I found a community here that I feel like I've known for decades, where not to give them, I give them a lot of credit, but to give myself some credit, it's just me showing up without all this bullshit to protect and to be safe to be seen now. So it feels like that is, I think it's always been there. I remember growing up, man, like my parents' friends would always say, oh, he's such like a nice, got such a good heart, this kid. But I felt as I entered business that wouldn't serve me. So I needed to put a lid on that. And, you know, I mean, and this goes into, there's a lot of programming in Hollywood and TV shows. The rich business guy is typically pretty evil.
Yep.
If you think of Home Alone, if you think of The Simpsons, you know, Mr. Burns, like the rich guy's always got an evil plan at the end, right? So I think I pushed all of that down because I thought being a success in business, I couldn't be kind. But that at the core is, I think, who I am. So when I dropped all those stories and dropped all that bullshit, of course, people and community just came to me, which I hadn't had before.
Dude, I knew we like resonated with each other, but it's getting stronger. What do you think is the armor that business front put on? So being kind led to ... e.g. taken advantage of, you wouldn't be taken serious as a coach. Like, what do you think that piece was for you around being kind? What was the quote unquote downside for you?
Yeah, I think that the consequence or the downside was, I wouldn't be taken seriously. I looked incredibly young. Like when I was in my 20s, I looked 16. So I think I wouldn't be taken seriously there. I had to appear more mature and wise. And I thought, ultimately it would be a rejection. It would be, pushed out of the tribe or not accepted. So I need to put on this front of being successful and tough and hard-nosed. I didn't realize that it can be and, not an or. It can be a kind and successful, not an or scenario.
It's I resonate with that so much. And one of the things that drew me to Taki, we both signed up to his mastermind at the same time, was at the time I needed to see evidence of a fucking ripping dude who could make bank and just be a chiller. Because for me, like business coaching meant a fucking suit. It meant this dry, stiff, stale, like emotionally unintelligent person. We just talk about business. Whereas when I went and met Taki, even though that's what I wanted, I remember the first time meeting him, came in for a bear hug, had no shoes. And I was like, who the fuck is this joker? Still trying to like repat and rewire my mind of like, oh, this can be done. So he, for me, was a massive influence in we can do business the way we want it. Is that a piece that essentially you went through of like almost the destruction of what you thought a business coach had to look like?
For sure. Yeah. Even just success in business in general. I mean, the people we see on The Apprentice around the world and the books written, and there still is that, and maybe it was my programming that brought into this, but there still is like that belief that they have to be tough and hard-nosed and show no mercy and compassion. What is that? That's not going to serve me in the boardroom or in a takeover or in a merger. Yeah. So it's a good realization. What did that with you and Tarks? What did that lead to? What did that realization lead to next for you?
The number one thing for me, and this is still a process, the more I do, the better I get at it. But generally speaking, someone who has layers and layers and layers of ego, mask, identity are pretty like stiff and rigid. That goes hand in hand. You speak to, Aubrey Marcus talks about the best shamans are the freest ones, the fun ones. Like the stiff and rigid part of us is generally speaking just ego, identity, hiding us from our true self. So my challenge was, in order to be taken seriously, I had to be serious. And that I remember the next morning, I looked at my Instagram and Will Smith was the first thing popping up, and obviously quite controversial at the moment, but like he was dropping knowledge bombs and wisdom bombs first thing in the morning. I was like, this dude like naturally is a bit of a joker. And that was what my mind needed just to start to rewire this belief. And like, I mean, this is a perfect example. We spent the first 30 minutes talking about masturbation. I'm talking to a business coach about masturbation, and, you've obviously know I'm very open about like all things on my page, and, hopefully it doesn't come across too dry. And, there's always layers of ego and identity that I'm, working through. But like, that was a big, like, fuck, we can talk about plant medicine if you want. We can talk about, no blowing, we can talk about anything. And for me, people talk about freedom. Oh, I'm not free to travel overseas, whatever. Dude, you're so fucking far away from being free from yourself in terms of your own state of mind and the identity and how you have to show up. Don't even worry about overseas for now. Just worry about finding more freedom in yourself. So he was a really big one for me now. And I can't imagine working with a business coach that didn't like come across that way. For me, it just needs to be a fit, and in order for that to be, it's just the casual approach to like business coaching, whatever realm you're in.
Yeah, and I think Taki brings joy, and I think joy is like our state we want to be in. Sort of that Richard Branson energy, like who's running or has founded multiple 8 or 9 figure empires. That he's got that child, big kid like energy. I was reminded, dude, I went to a Bucks on the weekend with my old schoolmates. Many of them I haven't seen for years. And my community, like my girlfriend and I joke that if we want to leave an event, it's a 2-hour process because we give hugs and DMs to every single person. And I went to this event and like I went to hug everyone, and they're doing like these handshakes and like keeping this distance and feeling really stiff. And I was like, oh yeah, this is sort of how like the muggles, the normies, or outside of my tighter community, this is how they interact. It just felt like this regression into this like stiff, rigid, show no emotion. It was such a weird paradox to leave what I'm used to and to step into that, which obviously was me 15 years ago, 10 years ago, but it was quite a contrast to see that.
Dude, Shani and I talk about this regularly, actually, because we're in a little bubble here in Byron Bay, and the majority of us are on the similar page and wavelength in terms of the way we think. Every time I go to a major city, I'm more and more blown away by the stiffness, the rigidness, the like, also like the numbness and like lack of life in the person. It's like you're looking at them, but they're not really there. And it like, I feel more and more of a separation from that every time I go into the big smoke. And it's similar to you, dude. Like, we're huggers. And then like I'm getting fucking blokes almost like jumping out of their skin going, what the fuck are you doing here? Pull back. It just gets weirder and weirder. So it's and that's the thing, we all create our own kind of filter bubble these days, and the internet strengthen that, with the algorithms and everything, but like it doesn't feel free. It does not feel free. And I, a big part for me with the nature of my work and, on an individual level, and obviously with momentum, is like life by design. And dude, these guys the majority of them aren't even close to a life by design. And I just want to know who that true person is. Let's go and do I together so I can really understand who you are. Let's do an MDMA ceremony together so I can really like feel you because, and fuck, I'm so far from perfect, in terms of really kind of oozing that deepest truth. But like, I can't feel a lot of those people. And that's, I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's scary. It's, I have a number of thoughts go through my mind every time I go back into the, one of the big smokes. But it's obviously similar thing for you.
For sure, man. Yeah, I resonate with that hard. And I guess that is I think you forget that's the, I don't want to say the norm. I think there's an awakening happening, but I think that is the majority, right? And they might be successful, whatever that means, but they're successful in their career, but are they being true to themselves? Where's that play and joy coming out? What's the depth that they're having with their partners or their close friends? I was joking the weekend, like I'd love to, whether secretly or non-secretly, just give these people in their water some medicines to open up and just to see them, just be them, let their heart shine out, versus the numbing and the rigidness that's pretty normal.
Well, one of the things that I talk about this with a lot of clients is this belief that, like, let's say we do MDMA, fuck it, won't beat around the bush, is, oh, you're finding yourself in an altered state. Dude, I reckon if you're taking pure MDMA, you're closer to your natural state than the way that you're showing up every day with your ego, with your traumas, with your wounds and everything. It's funny, our perception of like the way that we methodically, mind-numbingly work our way around the world, is our natural state. You're so fucking far from your natural state, the way you show up every single day. I'd be very mindful of what you deem natural state. And that's, that when I talk to my therapist about MDMA therapy and that bliss that you get, we're talking really clean MDMA therapy, not kind of washed out with heaps of other shit. He's like, I haven't got the science to back it up, but that blissful state that you're experiencing, I think, is pretty close to the natural state that you come into the world with.
Agreed.
Fucking amazing.
That is the baseline, and our masks and ego rigidness is the altered state, right? Like, what if that is actually just returning us to our pure bliss? Who's to say that's not our natural state?
100%.
Day-to-day, 9 to 5, busy mask we put on, that's the altered consciousness, really.
Spot on. Yeah. Food for thought. I'm going to divert quickly. I know we're kind of 45 minutes in and have loved this. Business. How do you do business differently from the way that you did it, say, 5 years ago? Because I know when we were last kind of chatting, we're both, somewhat interested in plant medicine. We were probably both a bit drier and a bit kind of business heady than we are now. How's business changed for you over the last 5 years with your own personal growth, the way you see the world, plant medicine, healing, and everything else that you've partaken in?
Dude, I love this question. You ask good questions, man. I love. What's funny, though, I feel if we caught up for a catch up, we'd be having the same conversation anyway.
100%.
It's changed a lot. And 2 years ago, I wanted to burn my business to the ground. I honestly felt I've been chasing validation externally through hitting financial numbers and growing my company to 7 figures per year. And now that I realized that's not what I want, I just felt like getting in a van and learning the guitar and, I don't know, living on 20K a year. It was a massive shift. But I think back then, even how I used to sell and how I would approach clients, there'd be some shame in there. There'd be some shaming of them. I mean, there'd be some very uncompassionate listening and coaching. So I think now, not only has it changed my drive and what you'd say more of a clean or light energy, which is fueling me, but the way here's a classic example. I'm sure your stuff has gotten copied before and will get copied in the future. And it's happened to me a few times. A couple of years ago, I found somebody copying my stuff and I publicly outed them and shamed them. because I thought this is my work. This is the right thing to do.
Mm.
And more recently when it happened, I messaged the guy privately and just showed him the post that he'd copied and said, hey man, what's going on here? Coach to coach, like we need to do better than this as an industry. You copy my work energetically is not going to land with your audience anyway, because it's not your voice and energy behind it. And he said, oh dude, like I thought when I saw your message, you're going to call me out. And I was like, well, I don't think shaming anybody has really changed the behavior very well permanently. And after I was like, oh, that's funny. And this bigger picture is like, I think we think change happens at a retreat or in a ceremony. I think change happens when you take a different path and then you reflect that without any resistance or needing any discipline shows something different. That to me, when I reflect, like, oh, that's cool, because a few years ago I would have like gotten this ego boost of publicly calling somebody out for doing this.
Totally get it. Yeah.
So that's like, I think that story highlights how I've changed everything, with seeing people with compassion, with listening better, with understanding better with clients and in sales conversations. And I think people can now feel that I truly want what's best for them versus shaming somebody and using high pressure tactics to get someone to join me or get someone to take an action. It never lasted when I did that.
Fuck, I resonate that so much. The hook or the tripwire. Some of that language I struggle with. So do your goals now shift a little bit from what you might have wanted? So you use like the language around 7-figure, coach, which is like probably the most common one-liner in our general space of coaching. But what does that look like now? If it was kind of monetary, maybe even status related previously, what's a goal look like for you now? Or do you not set goals? Like how's that different for you now?
Yeah, great question. Back then, I thought I wanted an 8-figure company with 50 employees. And I think I found a goal document I had from maybe 5 years ago. And the main goals was to have a penthouse in the city in Brisbane, to have these cars. And now it's more like to have land and a ranch and, to work 30 hours a week. But I think now it's more driven by impact and my family and my close community. I don't care to have the biggest coaching business in the world. I thought that drove me, but I don't think it actually ever truly did. And you and I were chatting a bit when the Northern Rivers floods happened, and I realized how much I'm driven by impact. And over the course of a few weeks down there, I thought I'd go for one day, and I went for 30 days straight, drove down every day. I realized like how that is an incredible fuel source, is giving when those people could never repay me in any way. Of course, I was getting something out of that. It wasn't, I wasn't just giving. I received something from that, but giving in that way reminded me that I'm driven so much by impact. So now I link any financial goals that I have to, well, where's that profit going? Because I honestly believe once we take home more than, 100K or whatever per year, our happiness doesn't really go up that much. I think there's a famous study that said 75K. That might be like 120 now with inflation or whatever. But I think like for me, doubling or tripling my business from this, my life doesn't change. I have great day-to-day habits and goals and stuff I do. What do I buy? More surfboards, a second 4-wheel drive? Like, that's cool. But I think now it's driven by impact. And what does my business success, what is that linked to? Meaning I'm building now where if any of my family gets sick, I can support them for years. If my kids need special care, I can support them until they need it. If people in my community, if friends or family, or when the next natural disaster happens, I can give without changing anything because I've got that set aside. That is what wakes me up without an alarm and gives me the clean fuel. A lot of my friends in the more spiritual or intuitive based business don't set goals at all, and they do very, very well. I like to set some. What's your spin on that personally?
Yeah, I spoke about it with a couple of boys last week, and we were working out what the financial drivers are. And what really stands out to me is more financial success really means probably more growth from me, because I'll work with more coaches, I'll do more healing. Like, I'll probably just put more money into my own personal development, really. And also, to be exactly as you said, to be able to share experiences with other people. And also potentially the third piece for me, to put myself in circles of big thinkers more regularly. Like, beyond that, Shani and I like cars a bit, but like a lot of people similar to you, I mean, you've been in a fortunate position where you've, have been and probably still are experiencing a level of financial success that, many personal trainers, many business coaches, many coaches in general would like to experience. And, one of the unfortunate things for a lot of people is they'll need to get there to know that it's not the answer. Like, we can say it till we're fucking black and blue in the face. And, they would have heard it 100 times before, but most are so conditioned to think that it's the answer that they're going to have to experience it themselves.
It's like that quote. It could even be Will Smith who said this, but I think it was who said, I wish everyone gets all their financial goals to realize that it's not what they want.
Yeah. So Jim Carrey,
right. Yeah.
I wish everyone would experience fame and money to realize that it's not the answer, but you kind of want people to experience it as soon as possible so that they don't have to put themselves through, endless shit to get there, realize it's not the answer, and then reassess life.
Correct. And I don't want anybody listening to this to confirm their story that money doesn't matter, because it does.
Very true.
And a lot of spiritually inclined business owners or entrepreneurs repel money by thinking that it does matter. But I think if that's the driver, that's the carrot. It's I don't think for most people it's what they truly want. And by the way, I've got mates who love cars, so they're into buying cars, and that's cool. Like, there's a part of me that still wants a freaking race car, like as a little boy. But I think that can't be the main reason.
Totally.
It has to be linked to something else. And I can't speak for others, but for me, impact or helping others is my clean fuel source.
Yeah. Impact. Yeah. And that's it's really important to distinguish that as well, because a car, if you really value cars, then of course that's a different thing. But a car, because you're fucking trying to keep up with the Joneses and you think that's an answer, that's a very different energy and a place that it's coming from. Because if you absolutely value, high on your value hierarchy is luxury cars, then you're going to really appreciate it when you get there. But if you think it's the answer, you'll get the new car a week later, 2 weeks later, you're like, oh fuck, that's worn off. That's not the answer. And then you start on the Ferris wheel again.
Right. Actually, what I really think on that is, people believe that the suit or the handbag or the car will give them a feeling.
Spot on.
But I know this, that we can tap into that feeling now. We don't need to wait for the car to feel that. We can actually feel that now. And what's ironic is that will attract the car quicker anyway.
Spot on.
They're showing up with joy or with groundedness or with calmness or with status or whatever we think that feeling is. But most of those feelings can be accessed in this moment.
Yeah. A lot easier than spending the next 10 years chasing something that will give you that feeling. Mate, thoroughly enjoyed it, and kind of thoroughly enjoyed that we didn't even speak about business coaching or anything along that path either. But for those personal trainers, coaches that want to explore you, but also just anyone who wants to explore your work, where's the best spot for them to find you?
For sure, man. Yeah, it's been I love how you ask questions and listen really well and take notes. Pete Tansley on Instagram, just my name. Most of my stuff stems from there, so that's probably the easiest place to find me. Please connect. Mention that you heard me here, and we can connect. We can connect on there.
Appreciate it, mate. Really good to catch up with you again.
Likewise, my man. Appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in this week. As always, if you enjoyed listening, please leave a review, give us a shout out across socials, or share with a friend so that we can continue to share these incredible conversations with more and more people.